crawling along, and he ended up in a side passage parallel to where the birth canal was, and ended up kind of in a position where his head was downhill. So his feet were up over his head. He was kind of head first crawling down into this spot, and it just kept getting tighter and tighter and tighter until it kind of, just like you see in the picture there, couldn't go no more. It just ended. And the orientation he was in, he couldn't just back himself out and squeeze himself out of there. He was stuck there.
Oh my goodness. Welcome to Creepalachia. Today we have a local legend in the room in the caving community. We would love to welcome Chris Colin. Thank you for being here, sir.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
So go ahead and start out by give me a little bit of background on you. We're gonna talk caving today, folks. We got several different incidents, some scary stories, and also some how-tos. So very excited to get into this. But how did you get into this? Like, where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in southern Pennsylvania, York County, Pennsylvania. Was always into the outdoors, always loved hiking, camping, doing that sort of thing. And, as a kid, going to commercial caves. I don't know if you've ever been to the caves that have all the lights and sidewalks in them. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, we always took a couple field trips to Indian Echo Caverns in Pennsylvania there, just outside of Hershey. A small little cave all lit up and stuff. My grandmother and my mom took me to Luray Caverns in Virginia off 81 when I was a little kid. So seeing these caves kind of, got hooked on them, thought it would be something that would be cool to do. And then in high school, we had a shop teacher that I don't know how we got into talking about caving, but he's like, oh, I know this cave. There's this cave over in Lancaster, Amish country.
Right.
And he gave us a map and everything and told us where this cave was. So a bunch of us high school friends would go up into this cave in Pennsylvania and hang out. And it's actually the largest tectonic cave on the East Coast.
Oh, wow.
So it's basically a big crack system. It can shift and move and kind of, there's a lot of loose rock in there. It's not the safest cave in the world for sure. But that's kind of where I got my start in caving. And we actually had a little incident in there too when I was a kid, not knowing what we were doing, just going in this cave. And there were multiple ways into this cave. So there was a way you could walk in, there was ways you could crawl in, and there was a skylight in the ceiling. And, the skylight you could rappel down. So you could rig a rope and slide down it. And as kids, we'd gone to this outdoor show and talked this guy into selling us a rope and just kind of taught ourselves how to rappel. Not what I recommend at all. But we went and started rappelling in this cave. And, you kind of go in, it's real tight. You can barely see, barely move. There's some rocks you got to work around. And I was hanging probably 10, 15 feet off the ground. And this rock, big boulder, a couple 100 pounds, broke loose above me, slammed into the side of me, kind of bruised up my side real good. And I remember hanging there from the rope and slid down to the ground. And, I was like, oh, I can walk. That was my first thought. I still remember I was probably 16 years old when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, hiked down off the mountain, got home. And of course my mom freaked out. She's like, what are you guys doing? What do you mean rocks are falling on you? We got to go to the doctor. And,
how heavy would you say the rock is or was?
I'd say it was 200-300 pounds.
Oh, wow.
It was like this. It was wedged in a real narrow spot. So probably maybe 2 feet, 1.5 feet wide. So as I was working down through that spot, we could see these rocks and we actually stood on them to see if they were, solid, I remember. And as I was rappelling, I was kind of staying off to the side and, making sure that this rock didn't fall on me. And it's lucky I was kind of off to the side because it didn't come right down on me. It kind of brushed my side.
That'd have been bad.
But long story short, having this experience kind of led me to learn the right way to do things. So we were just kids, out playing in the woods essentially like kids do and finding these caves. But, ended up linking up with local caving clubs and kind of learning the safe way to do caving with those guys. Went to college for outdoor recreation. I got a degree in adventure education leadership is what my degree actually says. So it's cool. Super cool. But yeah, starting into college and learning how to rock climb. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy sold us this rope. And, we were doing this all wrong. We're lucky we didn't get hurt worse. So, like a lot of things, caving, if you don't know what you're doing, can be really dangerous.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, but if you know what you're doing and you do it safely and you do it correctly, it can be super safe, super fun, awesome activity for all ages. You know, there's something for everybody. A lot of people, when you said it to me before we started rolling, you know, that they think caving, they think claustrophobia. They think
Yes.
tight, narrow spaces, you're going to get stuck. And I think we're going to talk about some people getting stuck and trapped, you know, here in a little bit. But a lot of caves, especially in West Virginia, are big, huge, giant passages. I mean, I got some pictures and some books here that 100-foot tall, 100-foot wide rivers running through these caves.
I'll shoot you.
So it's beautiful. We got some of the best caves in the world right here in West Virginia.
So
Appalachia.
My cave experience literally is like you said, the ones with lights in them. Carter Caves in Kentucky. Yeah,
familiar with that.
Kentucky. Yeah, I went there all the time when I was a kid, and they had them in stages. Like, okay, here's the beginner stage, which I never got out of. I was probably 7 years old. But I remember it being super cool seeing all the stalactites and the stalagmites, and they'd cut the lights out to scare everybody. And I was like, oh. So to clarify, you mainly stay towards the caves that are kind of not commercialized, or do you do both?
Correct. Yeah, we're wild caving, it's called. So we have systems here in West Virginia that go on for 40, 50 miles. So a lot of these systems are mapped. And you know, if you're working with the right caving groups and parts of different clubs and things like that, you can kind of go on these trips and learn these caves and kind of learn the routes and get the maps. And there's thousands, like I said, thousands of miles of caves right here.
That's awesome.
West Virginia.
So where are some on the local scene, like around the Fayette County, Raleigh County area? Are there many in that range? So
up here in this part of the state, we don't really have many caves. We don't have any caves really in Fayette or Raleigh County. The way the geology is, you got to go kind of towards the eastern part of the state, West Virginia border. Starting in the southern part of the state, Monroe County, Greenbrier County, the limestone's what caves are formed in. That's the kind of rock that we're looking for. So limestone is over 1,200 feet thick down there in Monroe and Greenbrier County. So that means you have 1,200 foot thick piece of rock for that cave to develop.
Wow.
And as you go north, it gets narrower and narrower, you know, and you get up into Pennsylvania State College, you know, it might only be 100 feet thick, that limestone. So the 81 corridor is kind of like the cave highway, you know, 81 from Knoxville all the way up to really close to State College, Pennsylvania. There's caves along that entire corridor, but because the limestone's so thick in Greenbrier, Monroe County, that's what's led to some of these really long, big systems that we got there.
Right. And the community, is that how this knowledge is passed? Like you just learn these things over the years and you tell each other like, hey man, join me on this, you know, cave trip, and you go and find a new place? Or how was all this information established?
Yeah. So there's actually a national organization, the National Speleological Society, the NSS. You can check out their website at caves.org. And they're an awesome resource for caving and caving clubs. So we're going to have local regional caving clubs that we call grottos. And if you go to caves.org, you can probably under Go Caving there.
Yeah, let's see here. Go Caving. I'm on the website here. Find
a grotto.
Find a grotto. And a grotto is
going to be your local caving club.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So these local caving clubs, you know, the closest one we have here is the Greenbrier Grotto. Mm-hmm. We meet once a month, the second Wednesday of the month. We've been meeting at the Asylum in Lewisburg. Sometimes meet at Greenbrier Valley Brewing Company. But if you come to some of our meetings and get to know us, we do a trip of the month every month. So kid-friendly trips, beginner-friendly trips, kind of get people out, let them experience caving, kind of expose them to the sport a little bit. And then you can kind of go from there. You can link up with more experienced cavers and do harder trips. There's some other really awesome organizations that we have in the state too. The West Virginia Cave Conservancy is another fantastic spot. They got a really cool website too. If you Google search them, you can find those guys as well. But those folks are actually buying cave entrances. So they're making sure that they're protected. A lot of these cave entrances were gating. So you got to have a key to get in them. They're protected. They're not going to get vandalized. They're not going to get destroyed by, folks going in there and, maybe not intentionally, but unintentionally going in and walking through a stream and stepping on a salamander or something like that. It's just because of unintended consequences a lot of times that these environments are really fragile and very sensitive. The formations you talked about, the stalactites, stalagmites, take millions of years to form.
Which one goes up? Which one goes down?
The stalactite hangs and the stalagmite is on the ground. And then after long enough time, they will come together and touch and make a column.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And like you said, going into some of these places, you have to be aware of the effects that, just having dirt, or reintroducing germs into an area. Is that kind of what the danger is to endanger
to some degree? We just faced an epidemic white nose syndrome with the bat population. It started back in about 2005. It was kind of unfortunate. I mentioned I went to college for outdoor recreation. And I started into college in 2005, right when white nose syndrome was hitting. And the school I went to actually had a caving program, multi-year, different level classes to learn caving and mapping and kind of everything that goes along with it. And because of this white nose syndrome, we weren't able to get access to caves. And it was something that the bats contracted. They still don't really know a whole lot about it. They don't know how it's goes from cave to cave, but it has wiped out entire bat populations. I used to go into some of these caves and find a whole roost of hundreds of bats. And now we go in these caves and we see 0 to maybe 5 or 6 bats.
Oh, wow.
We do think they're making a comeback. And there's thoughts, in the scientific side of caving that there have been these big bat die-offs in the past. One of my caver friends told us a story about they were in a cave and they were digging, because a lot of times to find new passage, you got to dig.
Yeah.
And they were digging and they found a whole layer of bat bones, just all compacted, probably from thousands of years ago. But it told them that there must have been a big bat die-off, and then the bats come back. But yeah, so this white nose syndrome, cavers, especially in Appalachia, are very aware of that. We want to clean our gear after we go in one cave before we take it into another cave. A lot of times like hot water. So that way you're kind of sanitizing it, killing any of that white nose syndrome. We don't think that cavers are the ones transporting this, but at the same time, very sensitive environments, life down there that, can only, a lot of times, only live in particular caves. There's a cave in Greenbrier County that's closed. So there's different statuses. You can have a cave that's open and recreational cavers can go in and do it. A lot of caves are closed. So this particular cave I'm mentioning, there's a salamander that only exists in that one cave.
Oh, wow.
In the entire world, it's only been documented in that one spot. So if you go in there and unknowingly tromp through the creek and crush that salamander, like that could be it, Yeah,
that's
they found medicine in different caves through different, life that lives down there, no light, not a lot of food. So things that can live in that space has value for a lot of different scientific reasons.
Man, that's so cool. So, this can be beautiful, but someone starting out, you highly recommend to join a grotto or to go on one of these beginner hikes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they are one of the best resources. If you don't know anybody that's caving, you're going to meet some awesome people. Cavers are a funny bunch for sure. They got great personalities, awesome people. They're all super welcoming these grottos. They want to get people involved. They want to show beginners kind of the right way to cave. So that's an awesome start.
That's great. Yeah, I saw you have a Christmas tree somewhere or something. Where is that at?
Yeah, so right before Christmas, we went into a West Virginia cave, and there's a passage called the Christmas Tree Room. And this cave has 30 miles of passages. So it probably took us maybe 3-4 hours to get back to this spot. And there's this awesome gypsum formation that looks like Christmas tree, and you can see it
okay. So I glanced at this and I was like, someone must have put a Christmas tree here in but it's actually formed that way.
That is like a gypsum formation. Yep.
Dude, that's so cool.
And you can see some of the other formations, like there's a real long stalactite hanging in front of me, and then it has things growing off the side of it, halectites we call them. So they're kind of like horizontally growing, you know, off the vertical stalagmite there, stalactite.
Well, I guess it's starting out before we get into the creepy stuff and the beautiful stuff. I have questions there too.
Yeah.
Let's kind of go through some basics. Like, what does someone need to know before, you know, what do they need to bring? Like, first off.
Yeah. You definitely, you want to have light, right? It is the blackest black you can think of in these caves. I mean, you turn the lights out, you cannot see your hand in front of your face. You are not going anywhere. So, you know, some of the cave rescues that have happened over the years are folks going into a cave with their cell phone flashlight, and their cell phone light dies. And that's where they sit until somebody comes and finds them, you know, 12 hours later. So we always recommend 3 sources of light. You know, a lot of things with cavings, redundant systems, right? We go places where, you know, the furthest I've been in 6 miles from the entrance. It took us 2 days to get there. So you gotta have lights, battery, backups for all that stuff, you know, if something fails. You also, you know, helmet, boots, good footwear. If you think about like the New River or a big whitewater stream, and if you imagine taking all the water out of that river, out of that stream, and the rocks that are left behind, that's kind of the terrain that you're going to be walking through in a cave. So real slippery. So a good set of boots with ankle support is always something I recommend to people. I've seen a lot of people show up with bad footwear, and man, it just like ruins their whole trip because they're slipping and sliding and just can't get a grip and can't, you know, it takes them forever to move a short distance in the cave. Knee pads, man, I caved a whole bunch when I was a kid with no knee pads. And I think my knees feel it now. So a lot of crawling and you know, sliding against rocks and stuff. So knee pads, elbow pads are like crutch for me now that I'm like almost 40 years old.
Yeah. That's why I'll sit around, I'll drive somewhere, and all of a sudden my knee feels like it has a nail in it. And I'm like, what in the world's going on?
I haven't got there yet, but my shoulder's starting to get that feeling.
Yeah.
You know, warm clothes. The caves in any given area are going to be the temperature, the average temperature of that area. So here in West Virginia, our caves are like 50 to 55 degrees. Up in Maine.
All year?
All year. Yep.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So now in the winter, it's like, oh man, it's 50 degrees down here. It's
nice. Awesome.
In the summertime, it's like the AC is always on. You know, it's the perfect temperature here in Appalachia.
Yeah.
But in Maine, there were caves that stayed 32 degrees, and there was ice in them in the middle of July. You go down into Mexico, and the caves down there might be 85, 90 degrees. So much warmer, much harder to move around. So here in Appalachia, you know, we want warm clothes, 100% humidity in the caves. You're crawling through water. A lot of times we're swimming in streams. In the wintertime, the water temperature is 40, 50 degrees. So good base layers, good outer layers, and then having extra clothes with you. I carry a pack, and I have a base layer that if I need to like strip down and put a whole dry layer on, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do coal seams affect the caves? Do you kind of stay away from places that's been mined or anything like that?
So the way the geology is, being that we are in limestone, it's a different geology.
Gotcha.
You know, up here we're on I believe it's the Appalachian Plateau, right? And this is where all the coal seams are in the sandstone. So when we're in the limestone, it's a whole different.
Gotcha. So the type of rock around coal is not near the things that you all go in.
100%. Yeah, we're not seeing coal.
Gotcha. And you know, there's been a lot of instances where people have went in coal mines, you know, stealing copper and different things in West Virginia. Yeah. Do not do this because the oxygen level is very low and you will die. So highly recommend you not going in abandoned coal mines. Someone mentioned to me, I worked with someone who done a little caving. They said also to notify someone before you go that isn't on the trip. Yeah,
you definitely want to tell somebody where you're going, tell them when you're going to be back. Don't cave alone. You know, we always recommend groups of 3 or 4. So that way, if somebody gets hurt, you can send somebody out for help. If you're in there by yourself and man, you didn't tell anybody where you're going, who knows how long it could be till they find you. There was a story about a guy, it wasn't even a cave, it was a canyon. And he didn't tell anybody where he was going. He was crawling down through this canyon. A rock fell on him, kind of similar to that story I talked about me happening when I was a kid. The rock that hit me just kind of hit me and kept going. The rock that hit him pinned his arm between the wall and the rock. And he sat there for 5 days until he finally cut his arm off with a Swiss Army knife.
Is this the 127 hours
yeah,
story?
That's exactly that story.
Yeah.
But that's like the classic story. Oh, man, tell somebody where you're going. That guy, nobody knew where he was. Nobody was coming to look for him in that spot. And he kind of, had to make his own rescue happen.
Yeah, there's videos out there of him making videos while he was stuck, right?
Yep. Yeah. There's the movie you mentioned, 127 hours. There's also a documentary that I think like Dateline did. That's, I think, even better than the movie because that shows the real videos he made, interviews with him. I actually went back to the spot in the canyon a year later after it happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did he end up living?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's what I said. He went back to that spot.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, yeah. Okay.
He cut his own arm off and then had to hike out of that place and do some rappels along the way.
Did he? So did he make a tourniquet?
I believe so.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. But definitely, you want to tell somebody where you're going. There's been a number of cave rescues like, man, this car has been parked at this spot where we know people cave for like 4 days. And they'll go in there and find these people who have been in there lost or, whatever this story was for multiple days, multiple hours.
Sure.
And, with cave rescues, we always say like cavers rescue cavers. If somebody calls 911 and says, my dad went in the cave and he said he'd be out in 2 hours and it's been 6, the state police calls us. There's a whole national training organization, National Cave Rescue Commission.
Wow.
And they don't really maintain a team, but they manage the training. And then, if something happens, I get a text message and other qualified cavers get a text message and we go help each other out.
So you're involved in that? Like you
100%.
Oh
yeah.
man,
yeah.
that's amazing. So have you ever ran into us? I mean, like, and you can get into whatever specifics you want, but have you ran into some dire situations, involving
I mean, I've definitely been called out on a couple rescues in the last few years since I've been participating in that. People falling and breaking arms. And essentially, if you go into a cave, like I was talking about, hard terrain, climbing over rocks, small spaces, on average, in a perfect condition, every 10 minutes you go in the cave is going to take us an hour to get you out in a rescue. So if you're in a cave 6 miles and something happens back there, we're talking about multiple days to rescue somebody. And a lot of times we might be doing patient care in the cave because of that. One time we brought ER doctors who were cavers into the cave and set the bone right there in the cave to get the patient out. I was just listening to a story the other day where there was a rescue in Turkey and this guy was down the cave and started having GI problems. And they ended up having to bring blood transfusions down to him in the cave and provide IV fluids to him in the cave. And where he was 1,000 meters down. So he was 3,000 feet below the surface. Ooh. It took 2 days to climb out to even tell anybody that this was happening down there.
Yeah.
So communications get delayed. And these rescues can really go on for a long time. So you need to have people that understand that terrain and, are trained in that sort of specialized rescue.
Do you have a specific protocol of like, okay, here are the steps. We got to, step 1, assess the situation or whatever. Are there typical protocols for how to do that? Like when you say every 10 minutes in takes an hour out, is that what you said?
Yeah. In a perfect world.
In a perfect world. So what's the process there? Do you bring a few people in and take turns carrying, or do you bring like a board to put them on? Or
yeah, I mean, every situation is different for sure. One thing that we do in caving is we establish entrance control because there's been instances where people go in on a rescue and they're not managing who's all going in the cave, and then they come out and they think the rescue's over. Well, Billy Bob was still in the cave and now he's lost, and there's a whole nother rescue going on after they thought the rescue was over. So they always want to establish that entrance control right out of the gate. And then assessing the patient care is number one. We want to take care of that patient. We want to make sure they're warm. We want to treat the injury if we can treat the injury. And then we establish communications. We run phone lines into the cave best we can. A lot of times we'll get right to where the patient's at, so that way we can communicate with the surface.
How does that work? Is there a reel at a truck and you just wheel it in there?
It's basically spools, a couple 100 feet on a spool, and we use old military phones from like the 1970s.
Wow.
Yeah, and you just wire up these spools as you go, wire up the phones, and like I said, it's just open line. So it's like the party line. If you have multiple, phones along the line and everybody picks it up and you can hear what's going on. But establishing those communications is key because, like I said, there's a delay between what's happening down here. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 2 days, So if something's happening with the patient and the people on the surface are planning to do this, well, now that all just changed.
Sure.
And then, getting a team in there and, the more muscle, the better. If you're carrying somebody out, we'll usually use a litter, like a rescue basket, and carry folks out. And if you think about cave terrain, man, that can get awful interesting because you can't just have 3 people line up on each side and walk along. We do things like we call turtles, where we'll literally put the litter on our back and, maybe belly crawl.
Wow.
I've been in a spot where, we might need to line a narrow crack, to push that litter through, and we literally put people in there to kind of pad it out to get the patient through. But in other instances, that the time we set the guy's bone in the cave, that guy crawled himself out of the cave, which blew me away. Before we even went in the cave, the doctor looked at me and said, "Hey, this guy's going to walk out of the cave. We're not going to have to carry him out." And he was way more experienced in any of this than me. So I didn't say anything, but in the back of my head, I'm like, there's no way this guy broke his tib fib and he's going to walk out of the cave. I mean, he didn't walk, but he crawled. He got himself out of the cave under his own power. And it was crazy to watch.
My dude, good job, whoever you are out there. So these caves, are there types, like, is every cave different, or is there certain ones like, okay, well, this one's, like how you have different types of coal mining. Some you'll go and you'll rappel, or some you'll crawl and just go lateral or whatever.
Yeah. So we have horizontal and vertical caves. So horizontal caves, what it sounds like. You can go in there, you can walk through the cave. You don't need to bring any ropes. And then we have vertical caves. So vertical caves, like I was talking about that one in Turkey, 1,000 meters down, you're pretty much on a rope the entire time, switching from this way, switching to that rope. But that cave is just dropping like an elevator shaft next to an elevator shaft, next to another elevator shaft. You kind of think of it.
Right.
A lot of what you'll see is a mix of that in Appalachia, where the caves will be mostly horizontal, but then you'll have pitches that you'll come to where it's like, all right, now we got to go down this 50-foot cliff to get to the next part of the cave. Or you might have 10 pitches in a particular part of the cave where we got to go 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. A lot of times these are next to or in waterfalls, which makes it kind of interesting because if the water's up, now all of a sudden you got water pelting you and making you wet as you're trying to climb back up a
waterfalls underground.
Mm-hmm.
How freaking cool.
Oh yeah.
I was talking to a woman who does this regularly. She's like, yeah, you could be going through this small crevice and then come out the bottom and all of a sudden there's a football field.
Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just,
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is so cool. I wish, maybe I think I could do this.
Oh yeah. We get you on a cave trip. We can get you underground. And, especially with the grottos, we have the helmets, we have the lights, we have the knee pads. So you come out in your first grotto trip, we can hook you up with all the gear and kind of, that way you can see if you like it or not. Because some people come out and they do it like, man, that was awesome. I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah.
I'm never going to do it again.
Right. Yeah. That's great. And she was talking about finding like old newspapers from the 60s and different kind of things sometimes under there. That's like kind of like a time capsule type thing.
Oh yeah. There's friends of mine have found mastodon skulls, humeruses, Lost World caves, commercial cave down Lewisburg. They found a bear skull in there that was 30,000 years old. And it like changed the history of that bear. Like they thought that bear had only been around for like 15,000 years. And then they found this skull and they're like, no, actually these bears have been around a lot longer than we thought. And where they found that skull was a spot thousands of people had been through. But a buddy of mine was trying to cave like every day for a whole year. And so that particular day, there was no other trips going on. So he's like, I'll just go down to Lost World. And the guy who owns Lost World let me go in there and just kind of poke around, and it'll count as a day underground. So he was in a spot that's a commercial part of the cave. There's literally a sidewalk like right there. And he just climbed up on this rock pile and was kind of digging around, looking at stuff, and like found this skull. And you can actually see that skull at Lost World. They have a little museum in there with fossils and stuff. And that skull and the pieces of that bear are there.
Wow. How many commercial cave systems are around that people can visit?
So we got Lost World in Lewisburg. I believe there's one up by Seneca Caverns, I think that's called. There used to be one down in Greenbrier County as well called Oregon Cave, but that's been closed for the last number of years. Beautiful cave. And then you got a number in Virginia.
Yeah.
Like I said, Luray Caverns is probably the cream of the crop. I mean, it's an interesting one because you go in there and they've literally made it so you can take like a wheelchair through there and paved it with bricks. They have a piano in there that a music professor went around with a hammer and banged on all the stalactites and stalagmites and figured out the music notes. Like, oh, this one's this note. This
No
one's
way.
this note. And there's little mallets that hang from the ceiling and they can play that piano and it's all around you coming from these little mallets hitting the stalactites.
Dude.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Wow. I bet that's so cool. And those, are they open year round pretty much?
Most of these caves are. Yep. Because like I said, it's 55 degrees down there. I was just down at Lost World right around Christmas time and they were really busy.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for something to do with the family. And like I said, the weather's warm down there. It's inside. So even on a rainy day like today, it's a beautiful day for caving.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, the one around Seneca Rocks I went to and filmed, and they had like a putt-putt course out from it. I can't remember the name of it though. They owned a bunch of cabins.
I think there's
too.
one they're called Smoke Hole.
That's it. Okay,
yeah, Smoke Hole.
That's the one I went to. Yeah, they had a putt-putt course outside of it, but even that was cool. You know, it was really awesome. So, all right, let's get into some trapped in a cave moments.
Yeah.
We have here the Thai cave rescue. Can you kind of set the scene of that and describe how this situation occurred?
Yeah. So this happened, I think, 2018. It's beginning of the monsoon season. Excuse me. So these 13 Thai kids and their coach decided they were going to go caving after practice. So they went to this cave. It's actually a national park in Thailand. There's park rangers and a lot of tourists kind of visit this cave. But these kids went in and they went back, deeper in the cave than most tourists would typically go. And it started raining when they went in the cave. And flood events are something that can really affect caves and your travel in caves. There's some of these caves that I was talking about 100 foot tall, 100 foot wide. In the right conditions, that passage could flood to the ceiling and the whole thing could be underwater. And that's what happened to these kids for the most part. They went down in this cave. It started raining. The creek water started coming up and the passage that they tried to get out was now flooded and blocked their entrance. So these kids sat in there, I think, for 8 days before any contact was made. So the Thai military came out and led the rescue. And it was, when you talk about any kind of cave rescue or outdoor rescue or anything of that nature, it was chaos there. I mean, the media circus that went on, it was kind of totally unregulated. When some rescue professionals showed up on the scene, it was literally like wading through like the attendees of a football game.
Oh, wow.
And there was no control of the scene. So the U.S. military went in and ended up helping with this. The Thai Navy SEALs were involved with this. And one of the things that was really a limiting factor for them at the beginning was to get to these kids, you had to cave dive. You had to scuba dive. Like I said, these passages you could once walk through are now full of water to the ceiling. Cave diving is something very, very specific. People train for years to go cave dive. And it's a really dangerous thing you can do. I talked about like just dry caving, the redundant systems that you need to have. Well, scuba diving, you got to bring your air supply with you and lights as well. And there's all kinds of redundant systems that happen down there. And if you're scuba diving in the ocean, something happens, you can kind of just go to the surface, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's no just going to the surface when you're in a cave like this. And also to make things worse, it was a river that they were diving in, and they had to swim against the current in many places to make progress.
So there's
forward.
enough to be current?
Yes.
Wow.
Strong current. Like
well,
any
because
river.
it's running out somewhere.
Yeah, it's just like any river,
Right.
And think like Whitewater River with like big rapids.
Wow. And what the picture we're looking at on screen for those just listening. So this was not flooded and they crawled down through here.
Yeah, so they got to a high spot in the cave.
Right.
So they got back to a spot in the cave that was not flooded. And there was a picture you had on the previous screen where you can see them on the left there. They basically found this little mud bank, and that was about all that's as big as that space was.
Right.
So they hunkered down in that spot for like 8 days, just hoping somebody would come get them. The water would come down. In this part of the world, I know people that this scenario has happened to. And in this part of the world, the water comes up, you wait a day or two. In this case, they waited 53 hours, and the water comes down and you can go back out the way you came in.
Right.
In Thailand, it was the beginning of monsoon season. So they were looking at like 6 months till the water was going to start coming down. So that's why they sent these divers in. It wasn't just like, oh, well, let's just wait for the water to come down. Here, we would just wait for the water to come down.
Wow.
So these divers went in there, and like I said, the Thai Navy SEALs, like awesome group of guys from what I understand. I've actually talked to and met some of the rescuers that were involved in this, and they were just in over their head. You know, like I said, cave diving is something super specific, and even though these guys were phenomenal divers, they weren't up to what this entailed.
Yeah, it's I would imagine it's like, I don't know, you're kind of diving in a tunnel. I don't know if that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a straight open tunnel. It's a tunnel with jagged rocks trying to grab your gear and rip your hoses off of you or rip your mask off of you. Or now there's a spot. Imagine we got to crawl under this chair right here with all our dive gear. Now we got to take our dive gear off and push our dive gear through in front of us, and then wiggle our way through. Oh yeah, it's some creepy
and
stuff.
all that while it's pushing, the current's pushing you different ways, and you're kind of.
So the SEALs couldn't make progress against that current. Rick Stanton was the guy who really is kind of given credit for leading the diving portion of this rescue. He was a UK guy, a Brit. Him and his buddy John came in.
This my dude here?
Yeah. And imagine being a young Thai Navy SEAL, thinking you're one of the best divers in the world. And this, he describes at the beginning of his book, here come these middle-aged white guys that, don't really look like they're going to do better than the Thai Navy SEALs are. But when it comes down to it, these guys are the best cave divers in the world. They've set depth records. They've been in systems where nobody else has been. And they came out there, and with the help of the U.S. military, they put together a pretty radical plan. They brought in another world-class cave diver from Australia who was also an anesthesiologist.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up sedating these kids. So
to bring them back through?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So there was thought that, these kids don't know how to dive, let alone cave dive. If they're going to try to dive these kids out of this space, they're going to panic. They're going to freak out. And there was an incident as these guys did their first dive into the cave, not the dive where they got to the kids, but they did their first dive into the cave. And the cave was progressively flooding. So there were certain chambers that people could get into. And as the rescue started, these pump workers went into the cave and they were trying to pump water out. Well, as the water continued to rise, I think it was chamber 3, they called this, these pump workers ended up stuck in chamber 3. Well, bad access control. Nobody knew who was in the cave. Nobody even knew these pump workers were missing. So where it says rescue center there.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody even knew these pump workers were missing. So Rick and John go in the cave, get to, they scuba dive through the first flooded section, pop up in chamber 3. And here's these guys. Don't speak a lick of English. They speak Thai, so there's a language barrier, but it's clear that they're stuck and they want to get out of here. It was just a short section they had to dive them through, but they described it as an underwater wrestling match.
So they were going to rescue and they ended up needing rescued, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So on John and Rick's first, it was just supposed to be like reconnaissance dive. Let's go in here and see what we're working with. Let's, see how far we can get. Let's lay a little bit of dive line. They go in there and find these pump workers and decide we're just going to dive them out. Because diving, you have your regulator, you have a spare regulator. So they gave the guy the spare regulator, basically held their head and pushed them underwater because they have language barriers. So it's not like, hey, here's what we're going to do. It's just like, and these guys, they said underwater wrestling match. And these guys were popping up and hitting their heads on the ceiling thinking, they're going to the surface and there's no air there.
Then these guys weren't knocked out.
No. So they
Okay.
got these guys out, but because of that situation, and the dive was hours with these kids. So they were like, we're going to have to sedate them. And very radical. It's never been done before. Nobody's been put under and then scuba dove. These kids were also small. So to find equipment that fit them correctly, they ended up using these full face masks. Rick Stanton wrote a book called Aquanaut. And it's an awesome account of this whole thing. And the last kid was the smallest kid, and the mask didn't quite fit him. And they made it work. There was instances where they had to give one of these kids CPR along the way out and actually resuscitate them during the rescue. And they went into this rescue thinking they were going to maybe be 50-50, maybe 60-40. They were willing to know there were going to be, people that wouldn't make it through this. And they got every single person.
They got them all out?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's kind of funny when they went in and they found them. And there's a video if you want to see it, you can probably find the video.
What's it called?
Just Rick Stanton finding Thai kids.
Let's see what we got here.
Because he had a GoPro on, so when he popped up into the cave, you could see the kids and you could see their conversation with them. So they identified they were there. They went out and they brought food back into them. And when they brought food back into them, some Thai Navy SEALs came in, and again diving over their head, not really understanding what they were doing. I think like 4 Thai Navy SEALs came in and they didn't have enough air to get out.
Wow.
So they ended up staying with these kids. And at the end of it all, once they rescued the Thai kids, the Brits essentially told the Thai SEALs, okay, they gave them the supplies they needed, but they're like, you got to get yourself out of here. Like, you got yourself in here. Get yourself out of here. Yeah.
Yeah. And credit to ITV News on this video we're going to watch. It says Rick Stanton gives incredible account of
gave
Thai
more details today about
rescue.
the incredible rescue by him and his diving colleagues in the caves in Thailand. He described the first moment he saw the boys and their football coach and realised that they were all still alive.
Yeah, that's right there where they...
Wow.
We'd been laying a line, pathfinding, and we were right at the very limit of our last bit of line, and we were actually in an airspace so we could talk. And the first thing I noticed, I was actually sniffing the air as we'd been going along, where appropriate, and I sniffed and I could smell them. They heard us, we heard them, and they started coming down a slope, and they were coming down one by one. The ledge wasn't really as described. They were around a corner out of sight, and they were coming down one by one. And as they were coming down, I was counting them 1, 2, 3, until I got to 13. So when John said, "How many of you are there?" I already had counted them all in, all there.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you.
How many of you?
Oh, man.
13.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
And until with the fact we'd got all 13, I was a little bit concerned. But once we got 13, that was fantastic. But of course, I was always thinking, okay, this is just the start. How on earth are we going to get them out? I was already on the next stage. Great to have found them, but it was no means any way certain what the outcome would be.
The outcome required the children to be led underwater by a diver, and they had to agree to be sedated to reduce any anxiety they may feel.
We presented it, that was the only way they were going to get out, and they had to be sedated to do so. So ethically, we had to tell them a day prior to the first rescue mission that we were going to sedate them and bring them out, and they had to agree to that.
Incredibly, it's now emerged that the children were unconscious for the duration of the rescue.
They were not conscious, no. The children, none of them remember the journey at all.
Wow.
The journey was about an hour and a half, and the children had to put their trust in the divers.
Each of the 4 divers was assigned a child on the day. We would dress them in a wetsuit. We had a buoyancy device on them and a harness, a cylinder, and then the full face mask. And we made sure that everything was on properly, very good seal on the mask. Everything was tightly cinched down. So they were basically a package with a handle, like a shopping bag. Generally, we were holding them so close, their head would be there, and my head would be there, so it'd be protecting. If we hit the ceiling, it would be my head that would be bumped, not theirs, and their exhaust bubbles were coming up right beside me, so you could feel and see the bubbles and hear them.
But Rick and the other divers knew that they had each boy's life in their hands.
Well, it's a huge responsibility. We're used to transporting all sorts of things underwater, but to transport a human life is about the ultimate responsibility. I did have a dream the other night that we'd found them, but we hadn't got them out yet, and we had all that to come. Luckily, it wasn't true. I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of messages from strangers. It's more than thanks. It's like thank you for what you've done, and you've shown a great example of humanity to the world.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. I got to meet Rick Stanton a couple years ago. The NSS puts on a convention, the National Speleological Society I mentioned, and it was in Elkins a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
And Rick was the keynote speaker. So he gave a big presentation, and it was really cool because, you know, he has all the stuff out in the media, but he kind of started the presentation off with like, how many people have seen or read my book? A whole room puts their hands up. How many people have seen the documentary The Rescue that's on National Geographic? Awesome. Johnny Chin, who did the
Free Solo?
Yeah, he's the one that directed
Oh,
The Rescue.
wow. I bet it's
Yeah,
good then.
so everybody in the room puts their hands up. There was a dramatization movie made as well by I'm trying to remember the director, real famous director. Everybody in the room puts their hands up, and he's like, well, okay, I'll just leave then. And he's like, y'all know the story. He's like, I'm not just going to stand up here and tell you the story. He's like, y'all are cavers. I'm a caver. He's like, I'm going to tell you the real deal, what happened.
Right.
And that's kind of where we got a little bit about like the chaos of when they showed up. And there was a whole plan on the back end to like escape them from the country, because there was fear that if this goes wrong and these kids die,
Oh, wow.
are they going to put the blame on us and try to throw us in jail? And their embassies had a whole plan to like throw them in the back of a truck and get them out of there if it didn't go the way they wanted it to go.
Man, that is amazing. Way to go, Rick. What a guy. And on that, we're going to move on to one that doesn't have definitely not a happy ending like this one. Which is the Nutty Putty Cave, which is the one it's kind of the only one I heard about before reaching out to you. And I was thinking, well, you know, I wonder what this is like from a caver's standpoint of what actually happened. So let's kind of, if you don't mind, set the scene on the Nutty Putty Cave and how that occurred and what actually occurred.
So this is a real famous story that a lot of people have heard. It's kind of definitely caught some media attention. There's lots of YouTube videos about it, lots of TikTok stories and things like that. It's probably one of the more famous cave rescue tragedies that have happened. But we're talking 2009 in Utah. There was this cave. It's called Nutty Putty Cave. And this guy, John Edward Jones, he was a 26-year-old medical student. He went on a trip into this cave. I believe he had been there before, but there were multiple passages in this cave, and he was looking for a particular passage called the birth. I thought it was the birth canal.
The birth
Yeah, that map you're looking at says the birth control. But the birth canal is a typical name in a lot of caves because we're talking about a tight squeeze. A lot of people pop through these things like, I feel like I've been born again.
Watch what you read, people. So I found one that has the birth canal.
Yeah.
That's what it's known as.
Yeah, the birth canal. So he was looking for this particular passage called the birth canal. And this cave was, like I said, small, crawling around probably, 2 foot by 3 foot sort of passages, especially this part of the cave where John was. So he was crawling along and he ended up in a side passage parallel to where the birth canal was, and ended up kind of in a position where his head was downhill. So his feet were up over his head. He was kind of head first crawling down into this spot, and it just kept getting tighter and tighter and tighter until it kind of, just like you see in the picture there, it couldn't go no more. It just ended. And the orientation he was in, he couldn't just back himself out and squeeze himself out of there. He was stuck there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I known people that this has happened to. I was just talking to a friend of mine the other night.
This right here?
Yeah. And I was telling him about coming on here and telling him what we were going to talk about. And he was telling me about, he was caving in Tennessee one time and got stuck in a position kind of like that, and they had to bring in ropes and rig a mechanical advantage system and pull him out of that spot. He said he was in there for about 3 hours. This guy spent 27 hours in this spot.
Oh my goodness. Just head down, blood rushing to his head. My see this, I'm just a doomsday person. This is automatically what I think I'm gonna do if I go anywhere.
That's why you got to go with somebody that knows the cave. Right?
Exactly. Well, I know enough to know I wouldn't have went through the beginning of this, but I understand the adrenaline and the exploration part of it. But man, this is just terrifying.
Well, and here's the thing, I don't mind getting to a tight spot and doing a little squeeze, but in the back of my mind, this little voice always like laughs at me and says, ha ha ha, you can't stand up. Ha ha ha. And sometimes I like, oh no, I can't stand up. And like, I got to like suppress that voice and like, tell it to shut up.
Yeah.
I remember one time we were in this cave and kind of similar story to this. I thought I was in one passage and I was getting tighter. It was getting tighter. And in my head, I was like, I just got to push through this spot. This is a means to an end. If I just hunker down and push through this, it's going to open up. And it wasn't opening up. It just got tighter and got tighter. And I had this little rock pile, had to kind of made it even tighter because I had to climb over this rock pile that was on the floor and I get through that and then get to the point where I'm like, this definitely isn't
Is this a cave you haven't been in before?
This was a new section that we've been in. So it was a very popular route. We were in there. We had the maps, the knowledge to read the maps. So we were following this route. And what had happened was probably 30 yards before where I'm talking about now, we were crawling along and the passage actually went up and over itself. And it's easy to get tunnel vision, just crawl along. And I was looking ahead and didn't realize the passage went back up and over.
So it goes by you and you don't realize that you're supposed to go up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some friends of mine always pick on me because I follow the elephant tracks a lot. In a lot of these caves that are heavily traveled, you can see the footprints. You can see where people are going. We call them the elephant tracks. Sometimes if you come to a spot and I'm like, do we go left or right? Well, it looks like everybody's been going that way. That's probably the way we should go. But that's not always the case. And many people had made this mistake. So this path had gotten, matted down just as much as the regular path. And I got back in this spot and was like, I'm going to have to figure out a way to turn around. I could barely turn around. I mean, we're probably talking foot ceiling, 10 to 12 inches tall. So I'm pancaked down and maybe 3.5 feet wide. So I'm able to like turn myself around in this position. And then I did what I call rage crawling. I put my head down. I got out of that hole as quick as I could. And in the process, remember I told you I kind of crawled over that rock pile.
Yep.
I didn't slow me down at all when I hit that rock pile. The next day I got out of the cave, my whole chest was black and blue because I was getting out of there. You know what I mean? But it was a horizontal spot I was in. So we didn't go head down. But my point is it's easy to make a wrong turn like that. And think you're in one spot and ended up headed down in a position like that.
Ooh, goodness gracious. So how did people figure out he was here?
There were other people with him on this. So he wasn't lost per se. He was just stuck in the cave.
Yeah. And so what did they try to do? Is this a shot? So is this his feet?
I don't know if that's him or that just might be.
I think that's a different.
Yeah, I think that's just showing you what it would have looked like.
Happened. Gotcha.
Yeah, I can't imagine they have a picture of him.
I wonder if they have a picture of him. Of who? Well, I mean, I don't know. Out of respect, it's just I see they have a, and just to let you know, John unfortunately, tragically passed away.
He did.
They have a memorial here, I guess. Is that near the cave?
That's probably the cave entrance. So, like I said, he passed away after 27 hours. They were able to reach him. They were able to give him oxygen, give him fluids, but eventually, I think that position he was in, the head first down, is what caused him to pass away. The official cause of death is cardiac arrest by positional asphyxiation. So that tells me the position he was in, caused him to not be able to keep going. But they concreted over the entrance of that cave and put that memorial there. So, now nobody can go in the cave and it's forever John's tomb.
Yeah. My goodness. That's like, I I mean, essentially like a crucifixion or something,
Yeah.
like when they, just the blood loss is what kills you. But man, that's awful.
And they did try to, rig pulleys to him and pull him out in different ways. But the way he was down in that spot, I don't know if your viewers can see that picture that you had up there on the screen, but it's kind of like
Which one? This one?
Yeah, it's kind of like a L shape, like an upside down L. And because of that 90-degree bend, you really have to pull him straight up. By pulling him horizontally there, all that's going to do is break his legs. It's not actually going to do anything to pull him out of the crack that he's down in.
Now, did they try to drill or anything? Is there anything really you could have done, to be honest?
I mean, like I said, trying to rig a pulley system to get him out of there, we definitely can drill in caves.
Yeah.
I talked about like in cave exploration digging. So people take hammer drills and, chisel their way through rocks in some cases. There's caves where the entrance was real small and it's a very heavily traveled cave. So they actually enlarged the entrance. So if there ever was a rescue, we could get a litter out of that rescue or out of that particular cave. But in something like that, because his head's at the bottom of that, I think any kind of rock that you would try to break or chisel out of there is just going to wedge against him more and trap him more. And obviously hit his head, that's the bottom of the hole.
Are there potentially ways to get trapped like this in systems out there that we don't know about yet? Or do we kind of know where the danger points are on most of these?
No, we're, I shouldn't say we, there's groups of people that are mapping and exploring caves every day. Mammoth Cave's the longest cave in the world, over 420 miles in Kentucky. And they're adding on to that cave all the time. Our longest cave in West Virginia is about 55 miles. There's actually two caves that go back and forth. They're both over 50 miles, and they'll add a little bit to this one, add a little bit to that one. There's a group called West Virginia Association for Cave Studies, WVACS for short, and they have a website as well. You can Google WVACS, West Virginia Association.
WVAC.
West Virginia Association, ACS.
Let's see what we got.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah, West Virginia Association.
Yeah, so these guys in the southern part of the state, they're doing trips every week, and they're constantly surveying and mapping, linking caves together. We talked about scuba diving. The longest cave right now was made the longest cave in the state because they took two systems. A guy scuba dove through a tunnel that they were pretty sure connected two together. And sure enough, they did.
Wow.
And there's a video on YouTube that you can see about that too. If anybody's interested, if you just look up the Great Savannah Cave System on YouTube.
We're going to do that. The Great
Savannah.
Oh man, I can't type. Look at that. All right. Great Savannah Cave System.
Yep.
All right, let's check this out.
Yeah, so I mean, Virgin Cave, you're going in the unknown, connecting caves.
Connecting caves.
Yep.
All right, shout out to the National help me there.
Speleological Society. I believe it was Dave Saki who made this video.
Oh, awesome.
For the NSS.
Well, shout out. Look up Connecting Caves on YouTube. Let's check this out here. We'll fast forward a little bit.
Sink Cave was explored and mapped to 10 miles in length in the mid-60s by the Pittsburgh, Boston, and Philly
Now, this is the
grottos.
Max Welton Sink Cave. I skipped ahead a little too far.
Access was through the Cove Creek entrance at a large limestone headwall near the Greenbrier Airport. But in 1969, Hurricane Camille flooded the headwall and filled the entrance with debris. During
this is kind of the story of
nearby McClung's Cave was
how they
being
discovered this cave.
surveyed.
Oh,
yeah. If you want, I can kind of synopsize this and you could jump ahead.
Go right ahead.
Essentially, there was a 10-mile cave system called Max Welton. It was opened up by a hurricane in the 60s. They went in, mapped 10 miles of cave, and then another hurricane came in and pushed a bunch of sediment and dirt into the cave entrance and closed it.
Hold on, okay, so you say opened up by a hurricane. Does that mean that things pushed things out of the way?
Yep.
And then eventually it revealed this system.
Yep. Imagine a big cliff, 200-foot tall cliff, and a creek going into the base of this cliff and just disappearing.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes you can follow the creek. Sometimes it dead ends. It's just a dirt pile. It's all based upon how much water flow is coming. And this hasn't been open since, I believe, the 70s.
And then someone's like, I'm going to grab a light and go in there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So because they knew the system was there and they mapped it, they decided they were going to dig into it. So they made this huge project. They basically made a quarry out there next to the Greenbrier Airport. And they dug a 40-foot shaft down into an existing entrance of this cave. And then there's another cave called McClung's Cave that's right next to it, about a 20-mile system. And these caves came within a couple 100 feet of each other. When they went into Max Welton,
so they didn't connect.
They didn't connect.
They were close. Okay.
When they went into Max Welton in 2001 is when they did that dig and opened it back up. So it had been 20, 30 years since anybody had been in there. So they start mapping it, and all of a sudden they break into this huge part of cave. They find miles and miles of cave. They find this big system called Sweetwater. And everything in this cave is north of I-64. So if you're familiar with that area, I-64 to the Lewisburg Airport, everything underneath the ground there is this cave system.
Wow.
The cool thing about this is the water in that cave comes out of the ground at a spot called Davis Springs down in Fort Spring.
Uh-huh.
So everything south of the highway of 64 from 64 to Fort Spring is probably 5-6 miles as the crow flies. There's a huge cave system there that nobody's
been yet.
Nobody's been, nobody's explored. Geology, hydrology all tells us that there's a cave system there. It's just going to take years of exploration and persistence to find our way through there. I mentioned Mammoth Cave being the longest in the world at 420 miles. This cave system, the land it sits on and the water flow that comes through it has potential to be just as big as Mammoth Cave.
We just haven't.
We might not ever find it. There might be passage that a human can't fit through, that's kind of breaking up that connection, which is what happened here, which is what you're about to see. So if you go down to the scroll bar,
sure,
and we can probably see along the bottom there, you got to start there.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
See what's going on.
Yeah, they got to bring all this gear into the cave now. So they decide they're going to connect these two caves via this water-filled passage.
And then everyone's personal gear. It was a lot of gear for 9 cavers to carry.
It's one of the tanks?
Yes.
Yeah.
A body-sized 8-foot deep hole into a short stream crawl posed the challenge for fitting the large packs down the hole.
You see some tight spots there.
This is a well-made production. Whoever made this, great job. I hope we need to get some traction on this video, y'all.
Yeah, Dave, he makes a lot of really good videos. And the NSS, like I mentioned, they have a convention every year and they do video awards. So cavers make a couple videos every year and put them in the video salon. And I think Dave won an award this year with this video.
Dave. Yeah, this is great.
That's perfect. All right.
After this awkward spot, there was a third and final vertical pit, a 12-foot nuisance climb. After this, vertical gear could be dropped as it was not needed for the rest of the trip.
They mentioned horizontal, vertical. This cave had a little bit of that vertical to get into the beginning of it.
Was the Champagne Squeeze, which was the connection dig between McClung's Cave and Lightner Cave.
Question, who comes up with these names? There's like Seven Fingers and Chocolate Avenue. I'm assuming that's a muddy place. I don't know.
The people that map it. So as cavers are exploring these caves, they're mapping as they go. So they are using, it used to be a tape measure and looking through a little sight glass. Now there's digital things, and you have a thing called a disto that's like the size of my phone. And I can shoot a little laser beam at the wall there, and it'll tell me how far away the wall is, what degree, it is from flat, the compass setting, north, east, southwest. And then we can use those measurements to plot that.
Ooh.
And then we draw a map around that. So literally as they're progressing in the cave, they're drawing essentially a floor plan. If you've ever looked at blueprints,
wow,
it's kind of what it reminds me of, a floor plan blueprint of the map as you go along. So those people that are mapping it, they get to name it.
Oh, that's awesome. And so is there any technology kind of how they have it now where they fly drones over a mountain and can map out the hills and the slopes of the mountain?
Yeah, LiDAR is an awesome
LiDAR,
thing.
that's it.
Yeah. I've seen some stories and read some articles where they've been playing with that in some caves. But where these people are going a lot of times to get all that gear to that spot. And then drones have a real limited battery life. So, where they're doing is kind of bigger open caves. They're using that LiDAR and definitely doing that in some places. I just, with my LiDAR on my phone, have mapped some rooms.
Oh, cool.
And it's super cool. You can literally like pull it up and scroll around and put my VR goggles on, like go into that spot. I definitely like blew some of the old timers away. And I was like, hey, when was the last time you were in this room? And then I was like, check this out.
Oh, that's awesome, dude.
The connection was dug open a while back when McClung's was first being surveyed. The connection crawl is actually a lot larger than it was when it was originally
So we can
opened.
probably jump ahead again a little bit. So this is them getting all that gear in there, right? We'll get to where they get to the water section here. So there we go. Let's start there. So took them probably 3-4 hours of schlepping all this gear through crawls and pancake spots and walking through streams, rappelling down drops to get to this spot, which is called a sump. So this is where the stream and the ceiling come together and meet each other. And you got to put on your scuba gear if you want to go any further.
All right. And this is all in West Virginia.
Yep. That's right underneath the Lewisburg Airport.
Oh, man. That's so cool.
So what do you think, Zed? Look good? All right.
It took 3 hours and 15 minutes to get all the gear from the entrance to the sump, traveling just 3,600 feet. But it was only 1 p.m. with plenty of time to do the dive. Visibility was okay, the stream was low, and the water temperature was around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and so the dive was on. Brian Williams was elected to do the initial dive. Getting ready for a dive is a long and careful process.
Elected, what do you draw sticks? Like,
So
okay, who's first?
There were 2 divers on this trip. So one of them was going to make the dive to see if it actually connected and lay a dive line. So whenever people are cave diving, they basically string out a small string that traces their path and, more importantly, helps them find the way out. In a dive like this, it's imagine pouring a pot of coffee and trying to scuba dive in that.
Oh, wow.
No visibility. We were listening to Rick. He was talking about feeling the bubbles from the kids because he couldn't see them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like diving in black, brown
So
water.
it's not filtered. I just assumed like, oh, well, it's probably somewhat clear, but not really.
Well,
It
when you
has
first saw
sediment.
those pictures, it was clear, but as soon as he gets in there and starts stirring up all that silt, it's just going to silt out and he's not going to be able to see anything.
Gotcha.
It is important to get everything right because your life really depends on it. There are no second chances in sump diving. Also, in most cases, sump diving is a solo activity, mainly because there is usually not much space in a sump, and visibility is easily reduced to the point where you would not even be able to see a partner. It would be too easy to get tangled in each other's gear if more than one diver tried to explore a sump. Not a good thing when there is no surface to swim up to for air.
These people are in shape. 3 hours and 15 minutes
also a
before
chore
you
for
got to
them.
do all this.
But also a lot of fun.
Yeah, caving keeps my boyish figure up.
Heck yeah.
Having some fun getting his fins on there.
Yeah.
Is your helmet like waterproof?
There you go. That's when he's coming back, I think.
Oh, is he coming back? Or
And that's him going down.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
There he goes.
You can see immediately how that's just all
yeah.
silting out.
It's time
Yeah,
for Brian
can't
to
even
disappear
hardly see
into
his
the
legs.
depths of McClung's sump.
So how deep is that? There? Not
it's
too
not
deep.
very deep. He describes it here, I believe, what the passage was like because they don't have any video.
Oh,
of it.
gotcha. Okay.
It's him coming back.
47 minutes later, the suspense builds. Was he successful? Wait for it.
On his line. Yeah, no kidding. All right.
Welcome to Beck's Club.
So that means he made it.
Yep. Yeah, he combined
With
the
this
names of the
historic
two
time.
caves.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so here's that
he
map
named
I
it.
was mentioning that they're drawing, and this is computer. They do it in a computer
Wow.
after they make the initial sketches. But that area they're pointing at, you can see is the spot they filled in on the map to make those two caves connect. to each
Oh,
other.
gotcha. Okay, so that was like that's a huge deal. It's like, okay, well, this is all one
Yep.
piece.
So they were originally able to basically lay that all out on a topo map initially and be like, these caves are almost touching.
Dude, that's so cool. And and it could continue on. Like you mentioned, it could beat the Mammoth Cave.
Yeah, I mean, it's only 55 miles right now, but the potential that's on the map and knowing geology and hydrology, there is huge potential there. They've been exploring Mammoth Cave since the 60s, and there's an organization over there, just like WeVax, they're doing trips all the time. So it just takes manpower and persistence and a certain type of person to keep pushing these caves further and further. But those people are out there.
Dude, that's so awesome. Is there anything that happens with erosion, or do some of these systems cave in eventually?
So I wouldn't say they really cave in. I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. When we're looking at big rocks on the ground that we call breakdown, that is rock that has fallen from the ceiling. But the scale of time that's happening in, I mean, it's like all of geology. Everything's moving and changing all the time, but not at a scale that we can really see it, right?
Sure.
So like the chances that you're going to be in the cave when that breakdown falls from the ceiling is super low that's going to happen. Now, these systems do change with flood events. I'd say this cave in particular, that connection they did was in a spot of the cave called Sweetwater River. That river goes for a number of miles and then sumps out again. And that's right around where the highway is. And there was thought that they could scuba dive that sump too to keep the cave going. And that's a part of the cave that, like I said, 100-foot ceilings that flood to the ceiling. And they went in there after a flood event. They took some divers down in there to do a recon trip they weren't going to dive that trip. They were just going to look at it and start making the plans. And that entire sump had changed and gotten filled in with stuff to the point where it wasn't even able to be dove anymore.
Wow.
So 2016, big flood in Greenbrier County. There's a lot of caves that people haven't been in since 2016, and it could have changed. Passages could have opened. So, they say when you're cave exploring, when somebody tells you they've already been there and it's already been checked, go check it again, because everybody looks at things differently and things change. And, especially with lights getting better, people used to go in here with carbide lights, little flame. You could see 20, 30 feet in front of you. You could see 20 feet up the wall. Now you have these electric lights. You can see 60 feet up the wall. And oh man, there's a tunnel up there that we didn't even know exists because our lights never reached that far. So yeah, these caves, they're going all the time. We call it Virgin Cave. People are finding Virgin Cave every weekend in West Virginia.
Are there any routes where people do overnight trips and things like that?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. We, like I said, the furthest I've been in a cave has been 6 miles from the entrance. It took us 2 days to get there. So it's kind of like alpine style. Like when you go up a mountain, you like start at the entrance. Obviously you go into a base camp, you drop a bunch of gear there, you go further into the cave, and then you come back to that base camp and go out. So I spent 3 days in a cave doing that. They do expeditions in Mexico and some of these big caves where they're down there for 3-4 weeks at a time.
Wow. What's that like when you see sunlight again? It's like, oh,
it doesn't matter if you've been in a cave for 2 hours or 2 weeks. When you come out and see the sunshine, it's always a good feeling.
Yeah, good deal. Well, cool. Well, moving on to our next one. So we have the 100-year anniversary coming up of Floyd Collins.
Yeah.
So kind of lay that one out for me. I know nothing about this.
Okay. So this is another story kind of similar to that Nutty Putty story where a guy got stuck in a cave. And we mentioned Mammoth Cave. Back in the 1920s, they called it the Cave Wars. There were all these commercial caves in that part of Kentucky that were all kind of competing for business. So they would literally like lie to people and be like, no, Mammoth Cave, collapsed and it caved in. Like you can't even go there anymore. But we have our cave over here. You can come check out our cave. And they would like rip each other's signs down, and it like literally was the cave wars, right?
Man, I love humans. I just do.
So Floyd Collins, he was trying to find a cave on his family property that they could commercialize and they could make money off of, because that's what everybody was doing there at the time. So he went into this cave. We're about 100-year anniversary, January 30th of 1925. There he is. Floyd Collins entered Sand Cave, which nobody had really been in before. And, he was hoping to find, that passage, that cave would open up so that way he could commercialize it. While he was trying to leave the cave, a big boulder kind of broke loose and fell on him and trapped him. It wasn't a huge boulder. Out of the notes I have said it only weighed 16 pounds, but the way it landed, it pinned his legs. Floyd was fortunate enough, he was in an upright position. So our friend from Nutty Putty Cave, he was head down. Floyd Collins was head up. He didn't tell anybody where he was going. So nobody was with him.
Oh, wow.
Nobody knew what was happening. But when he didn't come home, his brother noticed that, and his brother went looking for him. And his brother had a few ideas where he was at. So brother went into this cave and found him trapped in that particular spot. They tried to rescue him for a number of days. It actually became quite a media circus. They say that like if you pick up any newspaper from like the first 2 weeks of February from the 1920s, like anywhere in the country, like there's mentioning of this story and how this story was unfolding. And people were really into it even 100 years ago. So, in their attempts to rescue him, about 4 days in, there was another rock fall, which blocked their access to him. So they couldn't talk to him. They couldn't see him.
Is this a legitimate photo? Do you know? This is the one that pops up.
It might be.
Yeah.
It looks like it could be.
It's popping up.
What's the source of it? Where's it coming from?
Let's see. Source would be just Appalachian history. There's a bunch of this one showing.
Yeah, that photo
on
keeps
stories,
popping up a bunch.
But I don't know. Take that for what it's worth, people. But either way, terrifying.
Yeah. And so, like I said, the rockfall happened after 4 days, and then it took him another 17 days to get back to him and remove all that rock. And by that time, he had passed away. Some insiders, because they're having the 100-year anniversary, there's a lot of like caver talk about it. And there's some other podcasts in the caving community where they've been talking about Floyd Collins, and they think that he probably drowned. There was water dripping on his face during this whole thing. So they think that when the rockfall happened, that water was able to pull up. They think that that's kind of was his ultimate fate there.
Which would still suck, but be better than just like what happens to if you just get stuck somewhere? How do you die? Do you just die eventually of dehydration, or do you eventually just lose all?
In a spot like this, I would think it'd be exposure, hypothermia. Like I said, caves of Appalachia, they're going to be in the low 50s, 100% humidity. Especially we're talking 100 years ago, the clothing that he was probably wearing, was probably not the best stuff for outdoor recreation. So
now, was this in West Virginia?
No, this was Kentucky, right?
Kentucky,
Mammoth
gotcha.
Cave area.
So still, is Mammoth Cave like is all of it in Appalachia, or is a piece of it in Appalachia, or is
it's Western Kentucky?
So it's not.
Yeah, southwestern Kentucky. There were a number of caves that they all linked together to make that 420-mile system.
Gotcha. So 17 days later, they ended up bringing his body out.
Yep, they did. I think they left him in there for a number of months, and then his body was ultimately removed, and they buried him in a family cemetery.
A number of months. Goodness gracious. Let's see. I thought I saw... Yeah. Wonder if this is a real photo here. Looks like possibly from the...
Yeah, I'll tell you that is. Yep.
From the funeral. R.I.P.
Buried April 20th of 1925. So this happened, and he would have passed away in February.
Right.
Yep.
And then they eventually got him out a couple months later.
Yep.
Wow.
But really well-known story. There's been books written about it. I think there's a movie written about it. There is a musical that is getting ready to happen, I believe, somewhere in Kentucky this spring.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, how cool.
So the story
I mean,
of Floyd Collins.
Not cool, but that's a lot of culture there. But it shows you also, which was he kind of, what was his personality? Was he the type to kind of tear up other people's signs, or was he well liked, or do you know? Or,
I'm not sure what his personality was.
Gotcha. So, and it says the photo here, it says Great Crystal Cave on his. Did he own that or something?
I think that was another cave. So in the Crystal Cave, there is actually like, it looks like he's buried in the Crystal Cave, but he's not actually buried there. There's like a tomb and I think even like a coffin in there.
Oh, wow.
And whenever you cave in Crystal Cave, there was always a superstition among cavers that they would stop at that and invite Floyd on their trip.
Oh, wow.
And that was supposed to bring them good luck to find new cave.
So Floyd's kind of a ghost story with cavers. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say he could be a little bit of a ghost story if you're inviting his spirit to come with you to show you the way on in the cave.
Now,
I'd say so.
On all your travels, have you ever felt that creepy vibe of like, well, I don't know about this. I don't know if I should go around that corner or not. But
I mean, yeah, to some degree, I think so. There's always these places that kind of give us this little creepy vibe or creepy feel. I don't know if you know this. I actually do a little bit of paranormal investigation.
Sweet.
Yeah. At ACE, we used to lead ghost hunts into Thurmond. So I led those for a number of years. Me and Lola Reiser have done a bunch of ghost hunts with some celebrities over the years. We brought like Chad Lindbergh in a couple years to do some stuff. And then Trans-Allegheny, man, I love that place going up there.
Oh, yeah. We got a guy named Copperhead coming to talk about
I know.
it.
I've met Copperhead before. He's a character.
He's coming in. I've never met him. I've just talked to him on text, but I'm pumped.
Yeah. But yeah, so in my paranormal investigation, I really want to see a ghost, man. I really want to believe, but I'm also the guy that like, oh my gosh, we're in Trans-Allegheny. You hear the window banging, and I walk around for 10 minutes and find the window that the wind is banging, and that's what's making the noise. So it's like
there it is. I
haven't seen the shadow figure. I haven't seen the Confederate soldier on the horse down at Thurmond. When I see those things, I'll be like, but I have an open mind, and I've spent so much time in Trans-Allegheny by myself, walking around the corridors and nothing, feel perfectly fine. And I think what it is that it's like a radio station almost. Some people, like a psychic, man, they can tune right in that radio station. They can hear the whole program word for word. Some people just hear blips of the radio station. They don't know what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and some people just hear static. They don't get in it. I think I just hear static. I'm not tuned in that radio station for whatever reason. I've had psychics tell me that like, your great Uncle George follows you around. You don't know your great Uncle George, but you have a great Uncle George. And I looked back into the family history, and sure enough, there was a Uncle George.
Oh, wow.
And this psychic knew about him and like knew details about him and things like that. So like I have an open mind, but I haven't seen anything, heard anything myself. There's some stories in some West Virginia caves. Native Americans used to use some of these caves for different things. You can go in there and still find some of the petroglyphs in some of these caves. There was a cave where
petroglyph. What's that?
Like where they write on the wall.
Oh, okay.
Draw the pictures and stuff
Gotcha.
like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of these caves have that, and there's one cave in particular. It was a Native American that was buried in this cave, and they went in. I think they took him out and reburied him somewhere else. But some of my and this was 30, 40 years ago. Some of my caver friends were a part of that, and they took other natives in there during this process, and they tell some stories about feeling some things and hearing some things.
Yeah.
But personally, I have not seen the ghost in the cave yet.
So you're a healthy skeptic. Like, it's like, you still have the fun.
Oh,
like,
I want to see, man. I want to see the UFO. I want to see the ghost on the horse, but it hasn't happened yet.
Sure. Is your trail affiliated with Paranormal Trails that they just released?
So I don't believe we are. I haven't done that in, I think this will be the second year I haven't done it. Some of the property we used down there was getting updated to be a nice Airbnb home. So it didn't have that creepy abandoned house vibe anymore. And there's also some uncertainty about what's going to happen with some of those structures down at Thurmond.
Mm-hmm.
The Park Service is talking about tearing some of them down and whatnot.
Oh, no. I mean, I say, oh, no, but are they a danger? Like,
I don't think they're a danger. I think the Park Service years ago promised the people they bought these houses from that they were going to, preserve them for history. And that's the Park Service's kind of mission, is to preserve this history,
Yeah.
not to just tear it down and, forget about it. So it's an ongoing process right now. Some people are trying to save these buildings, some trying to bring them or, pave way for something else. But because of all that uncertainty, we just haven't done it in the last couple of years.
Thurman didn't. I'm going to do a story eventually on it, but it's the town that has 6 people population.
Yeah, there's about 6 people that live down there, the Dragons and the Bullocks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And is there a business down there? It seems like I heard about some of the Bullocks starting some type of business.
Now, the Bullocks do have a business. They have a distillery in Charleston.
That's okay.
And it's cool going back to the caves. They actually pull water out of a cave and then transport that water to Charleston, and they market their bourbon as like karst water. So karst is the type of topography that we have in caves. It's kind of like the sinkholes. So if you hear karst, it's basically a synonym for cave.
Mm-hmm.
So they're marketing their bourbon as made from cave water.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's cool.
And some of the best bourbon in Kentucky is limestone geology all around it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the Bourbon Trail. And listen, I think it tastes like motor oil, but I think to each their own. I don't know. I'm not a big liquor person. I'm more of a beer person, but all the local breweries around making all that. There's one that's like Mothman themed and Braxy themed. I can't remember who.
Greenbrier Valley.
Yeah.
I do it all, man. I work for them too.
Oh, nice.
I do their social media and some of their marketing and stuff like that. We have a beer, Bat Boy. So, you know the story about Bat Boy?
Oh, let's get into it. We got Bat Boy on here. We're talking paranormal stuff
now.
Yeah,
so the Weekly World News, Bat Boy was probably their biggest story that they ever put out there.
Was this in Appalachia?
Yeah, Lost World Cave that we were talking about down in Lewisburg. If you go to Lost World, you can throw quarters into the hole that Bat Boy crawled out of.
This made my month. I did not know Bat Boy was set up here. So yeah, lay this out for people.
Yeah. So, Bat Boy is a mix between a bat and a child. You can see his creepy photo there, as shown in the Weekly World News.
Totally real.
Yeah. So he came crawling out of a hole in Lost World and scurried up the wall and hissed at everybody. And, he was found, and the Weekly World News, man, they've been hunting him ever since. This was the initial. I don't think this is the initial story. They did many stories that like the FBI captured him in that one. Bat Boy the musical, Bat Child found in cave. So they kind of played off this character, and like the Weekly World News was always looking for Bat Boy, but he made his first appearance coming out of Lost World Cave.
Dude, that's so cool. I did not realize that.
Yeah, but like they made a musical about Bat Boy. We have a beer. It's a black lager at Greenbrier Valley Brewing Company that celebrates Bat Boy because essentially he did come out of our basement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I love the Braxy beer. It's like is it an IPA?
It's blonde ale.
Blonde ale.
Really drinkable.
Right, yeah, it's
really
great.
drinkable.
Excellent. And the can art is fabulous.
Yeah.
I don't know who did that, but the branding is really, really well done. Definitely check out Greenbrier Valley Brewing. And we got another one here. Let's do our last cave incident, which is Gary Vermillion.
Yeah.
I know nothing about this one too.
So we kind of touched upon this earlier. This was a buddy of mine. He actually worked at the brewery with Gary. That's how I know Gary.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
so this is local.
Yeah, and Gary's who like got me into the Greenbrier Grotto. He was my sponsor at WeVax. Gary's been caving for a bunch of years. So in 1999, Gary and 4 or 5 of his friends decided to go into this cave down in Monroe County, I believe, or just on the southern part of Greenbrier, if it is. And they went into this cave, and they didn't look at the weather before they went in there. And this cave was kind of prone to being flooded. So they dove into this cave, and the entrance, you're basically crawling through a stream and through narrow spots in the rock. And when they decided to come out of the cave, this whole passage was filled to the ceiling. It was basically a waterfall. There was no way to progress back out. So kind of like the Thailand kids, they were stuck in the cave. But unlike Thailand, wait a couple days and the water will come down eventually. So that's what they did. They waited 53 hours. The rescuers came to the cave.
53 hours.
Yeah, and sat outside the entrance. And actually, when they got there, they wrote a note and put it in a 2-liter soda bottle and threw it in the creek. And they got that in the cave. And they were like, "Oh, we're out here waiting for you. The rain has stopped. We expect the water to start coming down, on this day." So throughout that 53 hours, they would go back to where the entrance passage was. Nope, it's still flooded. And go back and wait it out. And one thing I remember Gary always tells me is, redundancy. You always want backup stuff. I got clothes to change into, dry clothes. He says, all that stuff you carry in your pack that you never, ever use. So it's majority of what's in my, he said, I was happy I had every bit of it on that trip. And they spent a lot of time cuddling, from what I understand.
Staying warm.
Yeah, there was one girl on that trip, and when she tells the story she was warm the whole time. Yeah, because everybody wanted to cuddle with her. Both sides, they were cuddling with her on. But that's what you got to do. You got to stay warm and fight off the hypothermia is the biggest threat in a situation like that. So being prepared. Something super simple we do. We call it a Palmer furnace. I carry a trash bag and a candle that burns for 36 hours. And if I get in a spot where I just need to wait it out, I literally pop a hole in the trash bag to pop my head through, put the candle down there between my legs, and just sit there. And the amount of heat that you get from that candle is super surprising.
Like this right here, this picture?
Yep, that's Palmer furnace right there. In that picture, it looks like he has a little tea light candle. Mm-hmm. Most people that kind of prepare for this, that's what you'll see them pack. That's going to burn for about an hour and then you're done. So they make these real nice survival candles. Like the one I have is 3 wicks. It'll burn for 36 hours. So if you're going to carry one of those with you, invest in having something good. Again, the trash bag. If you're going to, this thing's going to save your life. Do you want the crappiest trash bag you can get, Walmart brand, or do you want a nice thick
2-ply,
leaf bag that's really going to hold that heat in? So when you're putting these things together, think about how you can make them,
that's genius.
More efficient. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and Gary and them made it out, thankfully.
Yep, they made it out. 53 hours in there.
Heck yeah. Well, glad you're still with us, Gary. So let's move on. We're going to some more paranormal stuff. We got a couple more things here. So Native American spirits, which you mentioned already.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, and we got Pete Hauer.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. They I included this in there because they recently wrote a book called The Ballad of Pete Hauer. And it's kind of, there's the book right there.
Right here?
Yeah. Okay. This was a caver, kind of hippie guy back in the 70s. And all his friends describe him as super nice, lovable guy, not the kind of guy you would expect to commit murder.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So supposedly Pete murdered this young guy. And there's all these stories and speculation that there was a homosexual relationship involved, and maybe that's why he murdered him. Nobody really had a motive why Pete would murder this guy. But nonetheless, this young man was murdered, and they found the body in a cave right across the street from Pete's house.
Oh, wow.
And Pete disappeared. And Pete left a note that essentially admitting that he was the one who killed this kid, and he couldn't live with himself. And I don't know if he said he was going to go commit suicide in a cave, but everybody thought the way the note was written is that that's what Pete was going to go do. He was going to go commit suicide. He was going to do it in a cave. Nobody was ever going to find him. So months went on of people looking for Pete, all his caver, for all his friends are the cavers that are in these caves looking for him and thinking they're going to come around the corner and there's going to be Pete. They never found him. And there was really weird things that happened. This part of West Virginia is called Lobelia. And Lobelia is about 7-8 miles from 219, kind of Droop Mountain area. And the neighborhood is very diverse, shall we say, out in Lobelia. You have people that practice witchcraft out there. You have
how you spell it?
Oh, not like that. If you pull up Droop Mountain,
Droop,
Mountain. Just Droop, West Virginia.
WB.
And look at the map.
We'll find it here.
Yeah, go up
to the map.
Yeah, go look at the map because Lobelia will be right next to Droop Mountain.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got
Go left where 219 is.
going left,
Yeah. Up north.
north. We're almost there's Droop.
Yeah, you're probably over to the left right there. Jaycox up.
Jaycox.
Lobelia is like right in there. It might not say it, but that's where you're looking.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so
U Mountain Center. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there are biker gangs that had complexes. There are white supremacists had complexes out here.
Goodness gracious.
So you have literally a hippie commune next door to the white supremacists. And if you Google like white supremacist Lobelia, if we could spell it, right? There's a very famous.
I always tell people, I'm like, I'm gonna like
get flagged by Google.
No, I'm gonna export my Google history at the end of all this, whenever that may be. I'm gonna take a guess.
Yeah, it'll fix it for you. It's Google. It's smart.
WB.
That should be. It's a LEB. Is Lobelia.
LEB.
Yeah.
Okay. LEB.
I don't have the book.
It looks like this is.
But anyways, there's a real famous white supremacist that had a commune up there, or not a commune. It was right next to the hippie commune.
Right.
But he had a place up there that people lived and they did whatever they do up there. So anyways, my point was this neighborhood, there was a lot of weird stuff that happened in this neighborhood. So the book dives into all this, and I had a friend who was helping the state police do some of the investigations and go some places. And he tells a story about going into a house and there was like an altar with like dead animals, and the room was locked from the outside. So it was somebody was locked in, and there were bullet holes all around the room. Like somebody was just in this room just shooting at the walls.
Now, was the commune the Hare Krishnas?
It might have been.
I don't know.
I don't think
I've heard that they're real peaceful, but they had one leader that kind of.
That was up near Wheeling.
Oh, okay. That's a different place.
Is the Palace of Gold you're thinking of.
Yep. Which is, I have friends who've went and they're like, dude, it's crazy.
Yeah, I've been there.
That this just exists in West Virginia.
Yeah, you feel like you're in a different country when you go there, for sure.
That's crazy. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. But yeah, so my point here is there was a lot of weird stuff happening in this neighborhood, and the book really dives into all these different theories and who was talking to who and who might have had a motive to do what. But like I said, the note that Pete left said that they were pretty much going to find him in a cave. They never found him in a cave, but what they did find was some hunters a couple months later found him hanging in a tree, 40 feet up in the tree, bound with a bullet hole in his head.
This is true.
This is a true story. Now, as the story evolves and goes on, some people say the bullet hole wasn't a bullet hole, it was from birds pecking at him. But nonetheless, how do you climb a tree, bound yourself, hang yourself, and shoot yourself? And even just maybe it was birds, but climb a tree, bound yourself, hang yourself. So it was like somebody killed Pete and put Pete there and framed him for this murder. But that book goes into the whole thing. Pete was a caver. It was cavers who were looking for him, and it was a caver who wrote the book and is kind of really almost advocating for Pete in a way that he wasn't the person that did this murder. Because even though he left a note saying he was, they don't think that he was the one that did.
Now, could it possibly have been like a family member of the person that was killed? That maybe
could have been. That goes into it too. The family member of the boy coming back for revenge on Pete. That's definitely a theory in the book.
Wow. Man, so much stuff exists in these hills.
Right? You never know. Like, how did the hippies live next to the white supremacists and get along?
Yeah, that's nuts. Or are they still there now?
I believe there are remnants of them. These like
goodness gracious.
Yeah, these like centers or like developed, whatever you want to call it, organizations aren't existing there, but I'm sure some of the people that lived in these places are still farming that land.
Let's get along, people. Come on now.
Yeah.
Man. Well, Chris, what else can let's talk about some beauty. Now, I want to hear about some places that you would never imagine existing underground. Are there any particular ones that jump out to you that you visited?
Probably one of the prettiest places I've visited was on that trip where we were like 6 miles from the entrance. And there was this spot called Shins and Needles. and you were crawling along, you're probably not going to find any pictures of this place. But if you go to YouTube and go to my YouTube, there's a video of some raw footage that might have some stuff back in there.
Yeah.
Type in my name and Scott Hollow.
Scott Hollow.
There you go.
This one right here?
Yep.
All right.
So this is an overnight trip we did. So this is just on that 3-day trip. Every now and then I pulled my camera out and shot a couple little video clips, and no fancy editing. I literally just put on a YouTube video so some of the people that were on the trip could see the video I shot.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about this cave is it's under a house. So you go into this house, and then that's the basement.
Hold on. So this house, and then
yeah, there's a tunnel or like a culvert pipe in the floor in this
dude. So I bet that gets good business.
It's privately owned.
Oh, really?
Yeah, got to be a experienced caver to go in there.
Wow.
A lot of these places are regulated. The reason there's a house on it is to control who can go in there. Anybody just can't walk into this sort of place.
Right.
But yeah, crawling your way down these little canyons and stuff like that. So we get way back in this cave, and there's a spot where the gypsum kind of, imagine if you like trying to squeeze the last bit of toothpaste out of your toothpaste tube, and that little bit of toothpaste squeezes out. Well, in the rock, these gypsum crystals will squeeze out of the rock like that. And usually they squeeze out and they're tiny. Well, in this spot, they're 6 inches long, and some of them are as big around as my thumb.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And it's like being inside of a geode. If you want to go right to that spot, slide forward. I'll show you go back a little bit, or go forward. Keep going forward.
Yeah.
So right here, hit this. You'll like this spot. This is the Echo Connector. So this is where they discovered new cave beyond this. So this is like water, right, falling through here. It's like getting into the shower.
Dude, it looks like y'all are inside of a whale or something.
A whale?
It's like a fish.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see how tight that spot is. And not only are you in the tightness, you got all the water. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's my point of view of me squeezing through there.
Yeah. Oh, there. Oh, are we falling? Oh, okay. No.
I love it. I love it.
Anytime I say I love it, I'm reminding myself that I do actually love this.
That was told you.
So you get through that tight little spot, and then you come into a big, wide open passage like that.
Wow. Dude, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? 30 foot high or 25 foot high?
And then it's
like
dropping down. So at some point down there, it's 100 feet high in this passage.
Wow.
There's a spot in the cave called the Super Bowl. So there's a big pinnacle. It drops off about 40 feet to his right and about another 30 feet to his left. And you just kind of walk along the knife's edge of the mud bank there.
I mean, that's a movie set. And where's this again?
This is in Monroe County, West Virginia.
Wow. Man, that's awesome. What is this on the right?
So that was a dig somebody did. So while they were waiting and just killing time, they built a little mud castle at that spot.
Oh, cool.
So right after this clip is probably where we'll have the inside the geode. Yeah, you can see. Video doesn't do it justice, but you can see how the wall is just shimmering there.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can see these chunks of gypsum sticking out.
Yeah, you see it sparkling.
They're like flowers. All those spots, they're like they're like crystal flowers that are.
Like it's a vampire on Twilight.
All right. I am at my far reaches of Scott Hollow Cave here in the Outback, the flowstone dig that they did into the New Jersey Dome. Yeah, so all these spots have names. You know, it helps you kind of find your way through there. And then the biggest thing when you're going far back into these caves like this is knowing your way out.
Is this 6 miles in?
That was the way in where you saw my pack there. That was the passage I climbed through to get in
gotcha.
there. But, you know, everything looks different on the way out. So as we go into these caves, we're constantly looking behind us, seeing what it looks like on the way out. If possible, we have maps. If it's a new cave you haven't been in, you're mapping it as you go.
Yeah.
Good trip. Rock and roll.
I just have the most random question. You don't have to answer this. You stay overnight. Where does everyone go to the bathroom? I'm just curious.
So in most caves, whatever you take in the cave, you're going to take out of the cave.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you pack it in, you pack it out, leave no trace.
So that's the right thing to do. Like
there are some caves that there are established camps that will have latrines. So in this cave, we have a camp. We actually have running water.
Oh wow.
They rigged up a system with buckets to have a reservoir, and they strung like 300 feet of PEX tube 2.5 miles underground. And I can literally walk up to a spigot in this cave and like open up the water.
Dude, that's incredible.
And then, so just number one, you just go in kind of the drain of that spot. Number two, this is actually our camp right here, our established camp that we have.
That's so nice.
But you're going to get a 5-gallon bucket. You're going to fill it up with dirt. You're going to go into the latrine. You're going to do your business, and then you're going to dump your 5-gallon bucket out. So that part of the cave is getting filled in 1 5-gallon bucket at a time.
Wow.
And my hope is that in like 100,000 years from now, some archaeologist, I'm going to like make their day. They're going to be like, this is the oldest human feces we have ever found. Look how well preserved it is being in this cave.
They'll find a mosquito and create Jurassic Park.
So this is water. This is we're about chest deep water here in this part of the cave.
Oh, okay. So, and you all your gear's waterproof?
Yep.
I mean,
waterproof hats, you can see them there.
Yeah.
But this is an underground river, essentially. You know, we talk about waterfalls and things like that in caves. There's waterfalls over 100 feet tall in West Virginia, and some of them you can rappel right next to it, you know, and that's the way on in the cave.
Underground, and they're just constant. Wow. Yep. That's incredible.
And see, that's a little climb. There's actually, it's hard to see, there's actually a ladder there, an extension ladder that they've brought.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
1.5 miles into this cave to make that climb easier.
Yep. They're going up it.
Big, you can see that's a little person standing down there. Huge, tall room. So yeah, it's not all tight and claustrophobic, and that's the entrance. It's a culvert pipe with a ladder.
Okay, so you're leaving at this point?
Yeah, I'm coming out, seeing that daylight after 3 days.
It's gonna be like. Oh, well, that ain't bad. It's inside. Wow, that's so cool. It's like people don't. Oh, we gotta add. It's like people don't grow up and they just build tree forts, but underground. I mean, I don't know. It's just so cool that someone said, you know what? I'm going to make a hole to this cave in my house, and I'm going to build a house over it.
The coolest part about that cave is there's no natural entrance to that cave. A guy who I kind of consider a geology genius, he just knew what was going on with the geology there, and he knew that there was potential to be a big cave system in that spot. So you ever see the well drillers go around with the fork stick? That's how they know where to drill, right? They go around with the stick. It's almost like the dowsing rods, and where the stick goes down, that's where they drill. He had the stick from an apple tree, and Walker's back in 1985, where that stick went down, that's where he drilled. And 40 feet down, he broke into that cave, and they found a mastodon skull.
Wow.
Right where they popped into the cave. So that passage calls Mastodon.
You find the skull. What do you do with it? Just put it in your house? Like, all right, that's cool.
So there was a guy that worked with a lot of these caving groups. I think his name was Fred Grady, and he worked with the Smithsonian Institute. So Fred was always a great resource for, hey, what is this? And then if it was something spectacular, you know, a lot of these things ended up in the Smithsonian.
Awesome.
Now they're not on display. They're in a box in some warehouse somewhere for the most part. Some of the stuff they were actually like, oh man, this is really spectacular. And they brought in people from the Smithsonian and did digs in certain caves to get certain, I think it was a bird in one cave that they were really interested in. Some of the stuff they might be like, oh, this is pretty common, you know, keep it in your personal collection. I didn't show it to you in that video, but that section of cave we're in, there's a mastodon humerus. So that's like your arm bone there, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And it's still in the cave. It's sitting right there where
I got a picture of one here. They found something like this in the Lost World cavern.
Yep.
Cavern.
Lost World was a bear skull.
Oh, no, that's a bear. And then this mastodon. I mean, this thing's huge.
Yeah, and they come in different sizes, so it might not necessarily have been that big.
Gotcha. It could
But
have been a baby.
think about a woolly mammoth. That's what a mastodon is, a smaller woolly mammoth.
Dude, that's so awesome.
And a lot of these, they got in the caves because, at one point, that might have been an open cave entrance.
Mhm.
And they went into the cave and died there. And then over thousands, hundreds, tens of thousands of years, the cave filled in and that's not an entrance anymore. Or maybe it got washed down in a stream. We were standing in a cave one time waiting for a friend to change her shirt or something like that. My buddy looked down and pulled a piece of a tusk out, a mastodon tusk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's insane. All right. Well, Chris, any last words on people in their claustrophobic reactions when it comes to this, on why they should try this out?
Yeah, it's not
safely.
It's not all claustrophobia. The caving's beautiful. It's going to take you to a place that it's out of this world. A lot of times when I'm down there, I feel like I'm in a alien environment, and there's things down there are beautiful that lots of people don't get to see. So it's really unique. And if you want to give it a try, like I said, check out the Greenbrier Grotto. Super welcoming to new cavers. We'll loan you the gear. You can look us up on Facebook is the best way to find the Greenbrier Grotto, or come see us at the Asylum the second Wednesday of next month.
Heck yeah. And on that too, since you're listening, be sure to follow Creepalachia on TikTok for a day. I don't know. We'll see.
They'll save it.
We'll see where it ends up going, but subscribe on YouTube. Be sure to check out the podcast on Apple and Spotify. And I appreciate you being here and telling me this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. You ever want to talk about anything else in my vein? I'll come back.
Oh, I'm sure we could think of something. But thanks everyone for listening. And I also finally, long live Appalachia.